Alrighty, so today I'm going to do something a little bit different in terms of the emotion index. So rather of me usually do an emotion index where I put like 5 different tiers of how each of the fan base feel about their team at the specific part of the end of the month. For this emotion index, I am actually just going to grade each of the team and how they are doing so far this season. And this is kind of heavily inspired by the Extra Time radio podcast that I listened last week, where they did exactly the same thing, pretty much grading all 28 MLS team and how they're doing so far this season. And one thing that I will say in this video is that where I put these team in terms of the grade and the tier is going to be completely different than those people that did the podcast in terms of grading each of the team, because I'm trying to be unbiased as possible in terms of grading each of these teams, but I'm also going to try my best in terms of explaining why I put them in the grade that is here on the board. And as always, if you agree with or disagree with where I put your team in terms of the grading scale so far, how they've done this season, let me know in the comments below. But with that being said, let us actually begin. And we're actually not going to go alphabetical order. We're going to pretty much go random in terms of where each of these teams are. And we start off with Inter Miami. And for Inter Miami, I'm going to say they're at a C+ range. Now, earlier this season, they would be dead on in terms of the F range. So, yeah, I actually was trying to fit every single letter grade on the left side of the board, but I just ran out of space. So, I decided that, I'm just going to put an F grade on the side because, this is kind of the side that no team wants to belong. And believe me, I did put a couple of teams there because of how bad their season has gone. But for Miami, they look like they were bound to be in that corner of shame. I mean, in the beginning of the season, we talked about how they were one of the last team to get a win in the league, and were the last team to get a win in the Eastern Conference. And there was a lot of people talk about Phil Neville should be fired. Well, it seems like the conversation has definitely switched now, and that I hear some Miami fans are actually praising Neville for the very first time, which, again, that's how things can change in this league. Like, when you're a head coach in this league, it's all about result. If you get the result, the fans are going to be happy. If you don't get the result, yeah, the fans are going to be rightfully very angry about you and want you to leave. And that's kind of the case for Inter Miami, as they've just been in a very good run ever since they started the season winless. Now, whether or not if they can continue this good run, we shall see, because we've seen this before with this Inter Miami team. When they go on a good run, while everything is going well, as soon as they hit a wall and start losing a couple of games in a row, it turns into a long losing streak and they just completely fall out. But because of the great run that they had in the last 9 games ever since they got their first ever victory to end their winless run to start the season, they're now all the way up to 7th place in the Eastern Conference. And this is not supposed to be a team that compete for the playoffs, consider it when you look at the roster and how it's not really a talented roster. I mean, they've definitely discovered some good thing with Leo Campana, but it's just not just him that has been a thing that has good. I mean, the defense have definitely been better in these last couple of games. And who would have thought Drake Callender, who was a guy that when he came in for Inter Miami, he was kind of a little bit shaky, but he has really started to show some quality, and that he's definitely become a guy that is right in terms of getting the step of becoming one of the most underrated and probably an elite goalkeeper in this league. But now we're going to go with LAFC. And for LAFC, it's got to be A+. I mean, when you're leading the Supporter Shield standing, you, of course, are going to get the best grade possible. And this is despite the fact that I know their supporter group had done that weird protest about how they weren't happy with the way that their team was playing against their rival. And I get it. I get the frustration when you always lose to your rival and also lose in big games, which is kind of the thing that is the reason why LAFC has always been a team where I think maybe some of their fans don't care about the regular season result because they know they're good enough to make it to the playoffs. But what happened when they do get to the playoffs? Can they actually get the job done? But I think for this season itself, I think it's kind of weird the fact that you see it, but it's also the fact that after coming out of probably the most disappointing season and probably one of the most underachieving season I've seen an MLS team has gone through, I think their fans should be happy that they're back on top. And what's even more surprising is that they're doing this without Carlos Vela being their main star player. Like, if you think of LAFC right now, you're thinking, oh, they're good because Carlos Vela is firing on all cylinder. That has not been the case. I mean, he's been I would say average so far this season. I mean, he hasn't been totally terrible, but he's definitely hasn't been as good as what we've seen in the 2019 MVP season. But what is special about this LAFC team is that they always find ways to win games, and especially this is a very good second half team with a lot of guys on this team that can be a proven goal scorer. And when you have a team like that, it is always going to be the toughest team to face, and probably the most dangerous team to face too, because you just don't know who exactly is going to step up in terms of scoring those goals. But now moving to Toronto FC, and for TFC, yeah, I mean I would say a D grade. It is kind of generous because, you know, I know a lot of TFC fans would say that they should deserve an F grade with how bad of a start that this season had. But there was a stretch that there was some promising with some of those youngsters playing very well. But yeah, I mean, it hasn't been a great season so far for this team. I mean, it's also unsurprising that, you know, I put them in the D grade because, well, the big issue that they had so far this season starts with a D, which is defending. I mean, defending so far, I mean, last season I said it was bad and they need to bring some reinforcement. They kind of did with Carlos Salcedo, though he hasn't really been playing a lot with this team. I think he's been injured, and injuries once again continue to be a problem for this TFC team. But just in general, they just have not been a good team so far in terms of defense because they didn't really make enough reinforcement. And then going forward in the attack, I mean, they do have some good attacking threat. I mentioned one of the most underrated striker this season in Jesus Jimenez that have really done well, though he has kind of started to run into a bit of a dry spell, and it's also unsurprising that this is a team that has also started to struggle ever since he run into the dry spell, and that even now the attack has started to not look as good as what we've seen in the beginning of the year. But again, for a team that has such an aspiration of going back to the playoffs, especially bringing an MLS proven head coach in Bob Bradley, it has just been a disastrous season. And, you know, I know they're bringing Lorenzo Insigne in the summer, but I don't think he's going to be the one that's just going to simply lift this team out of a bad spot that they're in currently. But moving on to the Houston Dynamo, I'm going to give them a B. I mean, for the Dynamo, it's been a relatively good season so far. I mean, they haven't been spectacular, but I think they're definitely way ahead of their schedule in terms of the rebuild. And I mentioned before many times how, you know, a lot of those cornerstone pieces like Seba Ferreira has really finally lived up to the hype after getting off to a slow start. But even some of those placeholders that they had in terms of the rebuild are really performing and maybe even overperforming at the rate that they are. So yeah, you know, for the Dynamo, there's no doubt that this has been a pretty successful season. And again, even if they don't make it to the playoffs, if they finish right around where they are right now, it's going to definitely consider a success, because this season it looked like it was going to be another season where they're going to finish bottom of the Western Conference, with the way that it seems like they're committed to finally realize that they need to rebuild, and that I know they have signed a couple of veteran players in this team, but like I said, I just view them kind of like as placeholder. But so far those placeholder has performed at a rate that is definitely helping them punching above the weight, and again moving forward this rebuild that they are going through. But now we're gonna go with Charlotte FC, and I forgot to made another special category, and I'm gonna put it next to the F category, and that of course is the incomplete category. And I'm actually gonna put Charlotte there because, you know, for Charlotte, I know I could easily put them in the B plus category, because again, this is another team that is just punching above the weight, and that they're basically outperforming what Austin FC was in their expansion season, even what Nashville and Inter Miami was when they came into the league. But the reason why I put them incomplete is because of what happened last week with Miguel Angel Ramirez being fired, and that, again, you know, all we know so far right now is that he has some disagreement with Zoran Caneta, the sporting director of Charlotte FC, and also there's the rumor he had some disagreement with a DP player, most likely Karol Świderski. And yeah, I mean, with that all is happening, I mean, I just kind of put them in an incomplete because, you know, I just don't know how life is going to be for this Charlotte team under Miguel Angel Ramirez, because I really think the reason why they're punching above their weight is mainly due to the tactics and the tactician genius that Miguel Angel Ramirez has done. Like, you know, we said before, where even if you have a team that lacks talent, you can get a head coach that can really perform well. There's a good chance that you could still be punching above your weight and be a team that could be just sneaking in the conversation of making the playoffs, and that's exactly what Charlotte FC has been done. I mean, the job that Miguel Angel Ramirez has done incredible and have really get every inch of the quality that this team has, but now him no longer being there, I mean, there's that worry that they are starting to get to fall apart, and we'll see if that is the case. If that is the case, then yeah, they're going to be dropping down here. But right now I can't just put them in a B plus because of the move that they just made. So for now, it's just going to be incomplete. But we'll see what happens if I do a future video grading each team of how their season has gone so far. But now moving on to Orlando City. I'm going to say it's going to be like right here. It's going to be the C category. I mean, it's been a very frustrating season if you're an Orlando City fan. I mean, yes, I know they're still above the red line, and when you look at where they're in the standing, 5th place is not a bad position to be. But when you have a team like Orlando City that was supposed to make progress after last year, it feels like they kind of took a step back after they made major progress, making the playoffs for the very first time. Yeah, I mean, that's where the frustration began. And the other frustration with this team is none of the big name players that they bought so far this season has performed well. I mean, Facundo Torres haven't lived up to the amount that Orlando paid him, and the same goes with Arkin Kara, who Kara has scored a couple of goals, but not at a rate that they thought that could be their answer to replace Daryl DK. And not to mention the fact that they have been the most inconsistent team. Well, I would say, yeah, I would say they're kind of the most inconsistent. I mean, there's a lot of inconsistent team in the league, but I think they're the most inconsistent team because, again, they just feel like these last couple of games they've been following this win, draw, loss kind of pattern. And when you're just so inconsistent like that, it's got to drive your fan base absolutely nuts because you just don't know what kind of team you're going to get. Are you going to get the good Orlando team that we've seen before that could be the best team in the league, or the bad Orlando City team that looked like one of the worst team in the league? And also, I think maybe Orlando fans should ask Chicago Fire fans how to deal with it, because as I mentioned, the Fire has always been a team that is kind of associated to what Orlando City is dealing right now, which is they just cannot find any consistency whatsoever. But now moving to the Vancouver Whitecaps. Whitecaps are moving up in terms of this grading part, and again, if I would have done this kind of video in the beginning of the season, I would have definitely put the Whitecaps in the F category. Though, again, I've said before where the Whitecaps has been simply cursed this season with the amount of injuries that they've been dealing with. But it's also due to the part that, that Vanni Sartini magic that we saw from last season, it's just not been there, and that it seems like all the critics have been right of the fact that, well, what happened when Vanni Sartini magic runs out? What happened if they go through a tough stretch? Yeah, they went through that tough stretch in the beginning of the season, and that's when we started to find out that maybe Vanni Sartini isn't as magical as we first of all when he was with this team as an interim basis. And this is also why it's always tough for an interim head coach to just come in there and have a good run, and that this is also where it gets tricky for a lot of these teams, where it's easy to just make them a permanent base because of a good run that they had, but how much is that due to just that coaching boost and that good spirit that certainly Vanni Sartini brought to the locker room for the Whitecaps last season? Because now, what we saw in the beginning of the year, when things are definitely not going right, yeah, things definitely did not go right, and this team was bottom of the West for a very long time. But the reason why I started putting them in a pretty good grade is because if there's one thing that they've done well so far this season, which is they have been very tough to beat at home. I mean, as I mentioned, only lost one time this season at home, which was against the Portland Timbers. But also, this Whitecaps team has started to find that Vanni Sartini magic again. I mean, these last couple of games, they are definitely on a run, and they have started to get themselves in a position where they're actually not that far from making the playoffs and get above the red line. Like, that would have been unthinkable a couple of weeks ago. But with how great the Whitecaps has played, including getting another big victory against RSL this past weekend, yeah, this team is definitely on the rise, and Whitecaps fans are once again starting to be optimistic after they feel like it's here we go again after the disastrous start of the season. But now moving on to Austin FC. So for Austin, it's a B plus. I mean, it's been a very good season for Austin, in terms of being a second year team, and that we talk about how this has been a team that a lot of people have criticized the fact that the reason why they've been so good so far this season is because they had a paper thin schedule, and that it feels like a lot of people have now started to prove right the fact that when they now go through this tough stretch, they've only won one game out of this tough 10 game stretch that I mentioned before. And really, ever since I made that video talk about whether Austin is a pretender or a contender, they've only won once in those games. So yeah, I think that kind of down their grade a little bit with the way that, again, it feels like maybe they're playing a paper thin schedule. But like I said, as the old saying goes, you can only play against who you're facing. And we've seen so many times before where when teams do face against weaker team, all they do they overlook them, and they somehow lose those games. And that there's also a reason why in MLS it's a parity league, because anybody can beat anybody at a time. But for Austin, they want to prove that they are continue to be having a good season, and are going to make it to the playoffs in their second year. They need to get wins against these good teams, because as I mentioned, I feel like with the way that this year with the playoffs only half the team makes it, you simply need to not only just beat the team that you do, but also win your home games, but also maybe beat some good team too, so you can make sure you're in the top 7 spot, because I think it's going to be a dogfight this season, and I won't be surprised we're going to see some team that just miss out on the playoffs that in previous year they can definitely make it in previous season. But now moving to the Columbus Crew. Yeah, for Columbus, they are at a D category, and I know that the Caleb Porter or the Porter out kind of drums that some Columbus fans has been beaten ever since the disaster last season in the MLS Cup hangover is getting louder and louder. And I wouldn't blame those folks that are banging those drums, because I think right now it's pretty clear that the honeymoon period is over, and that Crew fans are getting more frustrated game with how this team has played. I mean, this team has clearly not played up to its potential, and that has been a really big fall from grace ever since they won the MLS Cup. I mean, a lot of the reason why they won the MLS Cup that season, you could say that maybe it's because of the chaotic nature of the 2020 season, but also with the way that they were a team that was just unbeatable at home and also play some good defense. That has not been the case this season for the Crew. They have dropped a lot of points so far at home, plus the fact that they really haven't done very well on the road, except for that one time when they were able to win against Atlanta United, because apparently they treat Mercedes-Benz Stadium like they're playing at home every time. But anywhere else, they've been terrible on the road, and also some of their difference maker like Lucas Arion hasn't really stepped up at a rate that they are hoping for, and also going forward in the attack. I mean, there's really not a lot of creativity there, and I haven't even got to the defense that once again has just been as bad as what we saw last season. But now moving to the New York Red Bulls. So they're going to be at a B plus. I mean, for the Red Bulls, I could have easily put them like around the B or C plus kind of range, because again, this team is just so weird. Like, this team is a team that I still cannot figure out how are they so good on the road, but then they also look bad at home at the same time. And originally, I did kind of had the fear, the fact that they were kind of a team that likes to play on the transition, which at times they do. And also, this team does have one of the lowest position, or actually not one of the lowest, but the lowest position when they're playing on the road. And we've seen it before now in modern day football. You don't need possession to win games. I mean, how many times I've done review, I talk about possession and how the losing team actually dominate possession, but they don't win the game. Because nowadays, the game is evolved into a very transitional kind of game, where if you can hit teams on the break, you can definitely create some chances instead of just kind of holding possession and trying to build up play, because defense have started to be much stronger in this league in terms of defending that. So I think maybe that kind of explains it. But also, they're still a pressing team. I mean, it's not like this is a. I mean, this team is still under Gerhard Struver, who likes to use the press, as we've seen with other former Red Bulls head coach that have coached this team, and that it's almost kind of like in their identity that the Red Bulls are the one that kind of invented the press. So again, a team that that plays that style and they don't have a lot of possession, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But hey, at least they finally got their first home win against DC United in the Atlantic Cup, and finally give their home fans that have visit that stadium game in and game out finally get a chance to celebrate after, I'm pretty sure their fans are probably frustrated the fact that, yeah, they've been a very good road team, but every time when I attend a game at the stadium, I haven't been able to watch the team win because they just simply haven't done so until they were able to beat DC just this past couple of weeks. But now moving to FC Cincinnati, I mean, it has to be an A for FC Cincinnati. I mean, this team is definitely way ahead of their schedule, and that, I talk about Miguel Angel Ramirez working miracles and getting every last inch of quality out of a relatively weak squad. I would say the same thing about Pat Nolan. I mean, Pat Nolan has done a great job in terms of giving every last inch of talent that this FC Cincinnati team has had. I mean, I will say that maybe I kind of underestimate how good this FC Cincinnati team is. I mean, going forward in the attack, they have a proven number 9 in Brendan Vasquez, and we talked about Lucho Acosta. Started to be kind of the Lucho Acosta from what we've seen in 2018 when he was with DC and part of that Lucha Root connection. But the other thing that I think Cincinnati has done very well so far is on the defense part. Well, for the most part, they've been very solid in the defense, but also finding a proven goalkeeper in Roman Salentano. Well, early in the season it was Alec Khan, but now it's Roman Salentano really locking it down in terms of making some incredible save to keep his team in the game. And add all that together, you get a team that is definitely not supposed to be a team that should be that good. I mean, the goal for FC Cincinnati this season was to get out of the bottom, but the fact that they're not even close to being at the bottom, but now being a team that, there's no jokes anymore. Like, they're not running jokes anymore when you play against them, and they're not like a team that I've mentioned many times are like the Santa Claus of MLS, gifting teams 3 points every single week. I mean, that you got to give a lot of credit of this team, and especially for Pat Nolan, done a great job in terms of really revitalize this team, and even the GM Chris Albright doing a good job in terms of, again, what's also interesting is they didn't really make a lot of signing to change their team this season, but I think a lot of that has to go with some of the draft picks, where they have also been very smart in terms of drafting some guys and bringing some youth player into this team, because there's a lot of good young talent on this team that we probably don't know in the beginning of the season, but they're definitely thriving under this team, which, again, it's not a big surprise because this is what exactly Chris Albright did to the Philadelphia Union, finding those young talent, putting them in the academy, and develop them in a way where they turns out to be very good when they move into the senior level and play for their MLS team. But now moving to DC United, and for DC, I mean, it's a C grade right now because, DC is still in it in terms of the playoff race, and that, what Chad Ashton has done to the team has been pretty well so far, and that he has definitely got this team back on the road of potentially improving from last season of them just missing out on the playoffs. But again, I just feel like this is a team that, even with Chad Ashton doing a good job, it feels like it's still a team that there's times where when they do face against tough opponent, they're unable to beat them. But it's okay. I mean, we know that this DC team still needs some quality in it, and at least what Chad Ashton has done to this team and getting most out of this team has kind of guided them in a way where they're still in the playoff race. So far I would say it's a C grade. Consider, again, they could have been in the F grade in the beginning of the season of how bad they start the beginning of the year. But now moving to the Portland Timbers. I could have easily given the Timbers an F grade because of how bad it is, but I'll spare them because of the fact that they've been dealing with some injury concerns so far this season, and there's times where they are missing a couple of important key guys, including Sebastian Blanco, who hasn't really been playing full 90 for a while now, and that this has also kind of started to give a lot of Timbers fans worried the fact that he's started to become injury prone, because there's been times that he's kind of on and off in terms of being in this team. There's times where he is playing in like the full 90, and then there's times where he's just kind of have to come off the bench or even sideline because of that knee injury that is still bothering him. But despite all that, this is a team that is, I just feel like, even though they didn't win an MLS Cup, maybe they're kind of suffering from that hangover a little bit, because the quality that this team has we saw last season has not shown in this season. Like, there is a lot of underachiever on that team, and that because of that, it has let this team to be a team that is nowhere near as good as they were last season. And I also would think that, as much as I put them there, I still believe that they can turn this around. I mean, I'm pretty sure Timbers fans are saying that because they know what's going to happen. Where, we've seen before where this team start off slow, but as soon as they get a big win, especially in a Cascadia derby, they can get themselves going, and it just feels like they just can't wait until they play the Seattle Sounders, which I think the first meeting will happen in July, so not that long from now. But the question is, they need to win that game, and that when I look at this team, I just don't know. No, this is a team that might be good enough to face against the Sounders, where the Sounders are starting to get themselves in good form and started to kind of start a very predictable second half resurgence that we're seeing from them. But now moving to Chicago Fire, and this is where I put the first team in the corner of shame, and that is, again, the Chicago Fire having an F grade. And I mean, I don't think a lot of Fire fans would disagree with that. It's been a disastrous season where I think their winless run is now hit double digit, or at least at least close in terms of that, because they did lose that game against Toronto FC. And that, yeah, I mean, this is a team that, it started so promising for this team. I mean, remember when this team were considered the best defensive team in the league? And yes, they had problem in terms of goal scoring, but that was kind of ignored with the way that they've done a great job in terms of defending. And they were also one of the last team to be unbeaten. And yeah, ever since that, they have just completely gone in a free fall, and that all the signings that they made this offseason, at least the bigger ones like Shaqiri and Shabilko, has not showed up whatsoever. And it's just, simply put, this team just have no attack whatsoever. Like, this team has probably the worst attack right now this season, and I think they also scored the fewest amount of goals so far this season. And I even said before, as good as their defense was in the beginning of the season, if you are heavily rely on your defense game in and then game out, it's going to start to show crack. And not only the fact that it has shown crack after the defense started to be bad, but also now that crack has now turned into a complete floodgates where, yeah, I mean, the water are just running through what was a very good defensive wall from this Fire team. And yeah, that's why they've now got themselves into the position where they are, where they're literally one of the worst team in the league because they can't score and also they can't defend. Well, actually, they have started to find success in terms of scoring, but it's now the problem on the defense too, where it's just not just the back line that's been bad. Their goalkeeper Gaga Slonina, a guy that was supposed to be viewed as the next U.S. men's national team goalkeeper, and even have drawn interest from Real Madrid. He has had a disastrous May and has really given up some really soft goals that you would not expect him to give up at. And that, I think, maybe the hype has kind of got to him, and that this is also why it's probably not the best that we hype him so much, because remember, he's only 17 years old. And for a guy that's only 17 years old, especially for a goalkeeper, that is incredibly young. And as soon as you hype a guy up, you put pressure on him, and it's not surprised that he's been buckled because of that pressure. But now moving to the LA Galaxy. So I would say the Galaxy are in the B category, and the Galaxy, they're not really in a complete fallout as I thought they were a couple of weeks ago. Like a couple of weeks ago when they were really struggling to score goals, and that Chicharito basically gone on a cold run that finally was ended in the last game, because I think in the last game he finally scored his first goal of what seems like it's been forever. But this is a team that I will say that so far this team at least has hold themselves in firm, but I still do have question in terms of the attack. And at least Jovic has been a guy that at the limited minutes that he's been getting, especially coming off the bench, have made a big impact to this team and at least have put the pressure a little bit off of Chicharito, which kind of also makes me wonder why in the world does he not get starting minutes because of how impactful he is coming off the bench. But I do still have question on that attack, and I still do have question in terms of the defense too. Yes, there's times where they have shown well this season on the defense, and that I think this is probably the best defense that they've shown in the past couple of years. They've also had some bad moment in the defensive part of the field, and that there's also time where they've gone back to 2021 Galaxy defense, which is a defense that basically just opened the floodgates for the opposition. But now we're going to Atlanta United, and again, I'm going to put Atlanta in the incomplete category because, it's very hard to judge this team when this entire team is basically injured to hell. Like, I talk about many times before Vancouver being a cursed team. It seems like now it's past the Atlanta United. Like, this team is just simply cursed with the injury bug, and that, every single week we hear an Atlanta United player been either gone down with a long-term injury or a torn ACL, or the fact that he's not going to be played for at least a couple of weeks. So yeah, I'm going to give them an incomplete grade in that. I know Atlanta fans are kind of frustrated about this, but what can you do? Every single season we always talk about a team that is decimated because of injuries, and that's why they've been performing poorly. And at least I think that's maybe a valid excuse, and especially in Atlanta cases where literally, I think the best 11 that they have right now is completely wiped out because of injury. And that include their goalkeeper too, and Brad Guzan, who's also done for the season, along with a lot of key name like Miles Robinson, also done for the season because of an ACL injury. But now moving to the New England Revolution, I'm going to say it's C-. So the Revs, they have started to kind of make some stride, at least in these last couple of games, but they're definitely slowly trying to recover from the slow start that they had. They have started to play much better in these last couple of games, but now my big concern with this Revs team now heading into the rest of the season is how are they going to look now that they don't have Adam Buksa for the rest of the season, because Buksa he's pretty much complete his transfer to RC Lons, and there were times in these last couple of games they were still heavily relying on him in terms of goal scoring. And then there's obviously that big question with Matt Turner too. Once he go to Arsenal, what do they do? Well, they do have a Serbian goalkeeper waiting to come in, but we still don't know whether or not if he can hit the ground running and be a good replacement for Matt Turner. I wouldn't say a good replacement, but at least a decent replacement, because we know that nobody can replace what Matt Turner has done for the New England Revolution. So yeah, there's a lot of big question mark about this team. That again, they are slowly making their way up the table, but is it fast enough where they can start to maybe get themselves back where they should be belong, which is near the top part of the standings? I don't know, and especially with the amount of talent that they lost. And I feel like this season, part of the reason why they haven't done well is the fact that maybe they lost too much of the talent. A lot of the talent that they lost includes guys like Tajon Buchanan and as I mentioned with Adam Books saw now, and I think those are legitimately attack talent that this team is going to dearly miss, and we'll see whether or not if that attack is going to be the same. And also in the defense too. Their defense have not been great this season compared to what they were last year. But now moving to the Seattle Sounders. And again, for the Sounders, I'm still going to put them in the incomplete category, even though I will say that I'm tempted to put them in like the B category, where, as I said, the Sounders are making their second half resurgence. They won 3 out of their last 4 games ever since they won CCL. Everybody saw this one coming. And even though I know that there's been games where they haven't looked like the Seattle Sounders, and there's times where they have looked like a beatable team, one thing about the Sounders, and one thing we always say about Champion, and it might sound like a cliche, but Champion always find ways to win games even when they're not at their best. And I think that when you look at the Sounders team, they're probably still not at their best, and trying to still kind of shake off the hangover of becoming the first ever MLS team to win CCL. But once this team started to get going, and especially even when they're not at their best and they're still winning this team can be a very dangerous team once they do start to get going and start to make that second half resurgence. That, as I said, we know it's coming. Like these last 4 games is just a small hint that they are going to go on a tear and get themselves up in the standings, even though they're sitting in 10th place right now. Or is it 11th place? I think it's like somewhere around there. But they're very close in terms of getting above the red line. In fact, since they play like the fewest amount of game in the Western Conference, they actually do have a couple of game in hand against teams that's above them. And if they win their 2 games in hand, at least for a lot of teams that play 14 games, they're actually above the red line right now. So in some way, even though they're below the red line, they're technically not when you look at the points per game if you go by there. So yeah, this is a team that I'm going to put incomplete right now, but don't be surprised that they could end up in this category, in the A category, once the season is over. We're going to go next to FC Dallas. And speaking of a team that is in the A category, it's got to be them. I mean, this Dallas team, it's been a very impressive season so far, albeit yes, these last couple of games they started to kind of cool off a little bit and they started to go on a little bit inconsistent. This team is still performing at a rate where it's been a great bounce back season. And a lot of that has to do with a combination of another prodigy coming out of their academy, really tearing up the league in Jesus Ferreira, and also a future U.S. men's national team number 9, as I think that will be the case. And then you also finally see them make some of these transfer in terms of getting veteran guys, and actually got it right with the likes of Paul Arriola and Alan Velasco really playing well for this team. And yeah, as a sort of that, Dallas has really got themselves in a good part of the standings. Oh, I didn't even forget to mention Martin Pass, another guy that has been very underrated and probably the most underrated goalkeeper right now with how amazing he's been for this Dallas team. But now moving to Minnesota. Yeah, for the Loons, it's going to be right around here. I mean, it's just been another disastrous season for the Loons, and that again, I don't really need to explain too much about this team of why exactly they're struggling so much, because it's basically the same problem as last season. They can't score, and that they're basically a one-man team with Reynoso being the only guy that can do things on the attack. And how many times when we said that if you're a one-man team and you don't have anybody to support your number 10, it just does not go well. And that's just kind of the case with this team. And that, you know, so far, at least one thing I will say that the reason why this team at least is hovering around the playoff position is Dane Sinclair is just basically a god right now, and that he is definitely in the running for goalkeeper of the year. Because if it wasn't for him, this team would be near the bottom of the Western Conference right now. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it feels like it's 2021 all over again. But I feel like this is even worse, because at least in 2021, yes, they struggle in terms of goal scoring, but eventually they kind of find some good form, and eventually when they do make some of those summer signings, some of those guys really perform well. And I'm just hoping this is going to be the same case again, because I think in the summer there's definitely going to be some offloading, and that there's going to be some of those attacking players that I think the Loons are going to get rid of, and hopefully maybe they'll once again go in the transfer market to get some attacking talent to kind of replace them. Because, you know, if they don't do that, I think they might as well just kind of tear it down. Or, you know, the big thing that a lot of people have said about Minnesota, at least from the fan base, is the fact that Adrian Heath simply needs to be let go. And that, I mean, I have always been trying to stay away from the Heath out bandwagon, because, you know, Adrian Heath, as much as he's been getting a lot of hatred from this team, he still have done some incredible thing for this team. But as the game goes along, and especially with how they've been playing these last couple of games. Really, I think this the first time I really venture in the Heath out kind of circle. If I would have done kind of like a Venn diagram. I mean, if I did a Venn diagram, I would kind of still be in the middle ground. But really, that when I got venture into the Heath out kind of part of the Venn diagram was when they lost to Union Omaha. I mean, that was just simply an embarrassing loss. It's probably the most embarrassing loss that this team has had, and probably even more embarrassing than when they lost 5-1 in their first ever game, or the 6-1 loss that they suffer in the hands of Atlanta United in the first ever game. home game in their franchise history. But now moving on to the Colorado Rapids. Yeah, for the Rapids, it's been a rough season, and it's been kind of a season where they have suffered what many people thought that they would do, which is a regression. I mean, yeah, I know a lot of people will say that season when they finished first was just complete accident and it was just a fluke. But I think, to this day, I don't think it was kind of a fluke because, one, you don't finish first by accident, and you don't beat a good team by accident throughout a 34-game season. And one of the reasons why the Rapids were so successful last season is that a lot of those players were really playing kind of over their, well, I wouldn't say over their heads, but a lot of the players were performing well, and they have good head coaching to back that up. And simply put, they were just playing like a team. And when you play like a team and you play hard every single game, you're going to win games no matter what kind of opponent that they face. But unfortunately this season, that hasn't been the same case. And again, a lot of that has to do with some of those players kind of started to go back down to earth, and that also the issue with no number 9 and just no DP on this team is started to kind of catch up to them in terms of quality. And also, let's not forget the fact that this team is heavily reliant on their home form. I mean, their home form, which has been very good this season. In fact, they only suffered their first loss in 23 home games against Nashville SC this before we go into this June international break. Their road for has been absolutely dreadful. And when you're a team that is going to make the playoffs this season, and I said before early in this video, you need to not only win your home games, but you gotta at least get some road points, and that's just not been the case for this Rapids team. They have not been able to find the same road success as they kind of find last season, and they also started to kind of look like a Rapids team that we've seen before. They are a team that do struggle on the road. But now moving to Sporting KC, and this is the second team that is in the F category, and I think that's the only other team I put in the F category when I look down here on my notebook where I grade each of these teams. And yeah, I mean, it's no surprise that I say Sporting KC is in the F category, because this is probably the lowest that Sporting KC has been in the last decades or so. I mean, I don't remember the last time they were this low in the Western Conference. Like, this is even worse than what we saw in 2019 when they finished 11th and miss out on the playoffs for the first time in over a decade. And simply put, I think the reason why Sporting KC is struggling so much this season isn't fully because of the fact that Alan Pulido is out for the season, but just simply put, I think this team just kind of look old in terms of the core that have guided them to decades of success, but also the fact that they tried to replace some of those core players, and it has failed miserably. Like, most of the signings that they tried to maybe replace some of those core players has not worked whatsoever. And a lot of that comes on the defensive front, where they still have problem in terms of that. But also, I think the main focus has to be on the attack, and that, again, coming in this season, I mentioned before, Daniel Sharry and Johnny Russell needs to carry this team. And, there's times where Sharry and Russell have shown that they can carry the team. It has not been as effective as what we've seen last season. And because of that, plus we got the injuries to Pulido and also Gadi Kinda in some extent, yeah, that's what you get a Sporting KC team like this, where this is just simply a team that look like it has passed its core, and that championship window, which I thought it was maybe open last season after they go on a good run, is now slammed shut once again. And that, again, now heading into this offseason, as I mentioned, they got some soul searching to do, and that they have to make that decision of whether they should just blow it up now and just kind of go into a rebuild for the first time in over a decade, or even do the unthinkable of potentially letting go Peter Vermees and maybe heading into a new direction. Because you just simply put, I feel like this team, it feels like this is a dying part of just such an amazing run that they had. And anytime when you're at that point, if you're a team, you just simply need to just maybe blow it up and just kind of restart from the beginning. But now moving on to Nashville SC. For Nashville, they're going to be in the A- category. Now, I didn't put them in the A category because so far, in terms of some of the home games that they had, and even though they haven't lost a home game so far. They haven't got maximum points in terms of their home games, and also not to mention, they're a team that, I would also say that they're kind of in the incomplete category with the way that, if they can do well at home, this is a team that will be at that spot that I predicted that they will finish in the beginning of the season, which is at the top of the Western Conference. But hey, at least they are in 6th in the Western Conference. They're actually not that far in terms of the top spot, and with a lot of those home games left, and if they can perform the same way that they have play at home, which, in the last year, their home form wasn't actually the best at Nissan Stadium last season, but their road form was also pretty decent, and it seems like that is the case, and we'll see with this year whether that's going to continue, because like I said, at home this season they haven't got maximum points, and they also dropped some resort, including probably the most disappointing one, which is dropping the resort against Atlanta United just this past home game. But now moving on to Montreal, and for Montreal, I would say it's an A grade. I mean, yes, this team has cooled off a little bit after they went on that franchise record 8-game unbeaten run, but this is still a team that, consider where they were at the end of their CCL run, it's been incredible to see Wilfried Nancy team to, I've said that this is kind of a dark horse team and can do very well, but we've seen before where sometimes I call a team that is a dark horse and maybe a team to look out for, it doesn't always transition, and it seemed like that was the case in the beginning of the year, but that has not been the case after they were out of CCL, and that they, alongside with NYCFC and in some extent the Seattle Sounders, have fried after they were eliminated in CCL, which again, this was never always the trend. Like, I've always seen before where teams go into CCL and once they get eliminated, they suffer through a hangover and never been able to recover. But we start to maybe see a turn to that trend where once you get out of CCL, maybe you can start to get yourself back to a decent form and maybe live up to your potential. I mean, don't tell that to New England Revolution fan, because I think they're still suffering from that CCL kind of elimination and still suffering from that same pattern of being still slowly trying to get going. But at least for Montreal, that's not been the case. I mean, they have really shot out at the cannon ever since they exit out of CCL and have performed at a rate that what we expect with some of the signings that they made, and the fact that we know that this could be a team that could easily be a dark horse and could be a playoff team. But now moving to the San Jose Earthquakes, again, I'm going to say it's a C- grade. I was thinking about putting them in the same rate as DC United, because I feel like both of these teams are kind of heading into almost the same direction, where they fire their head coach early in the season, they bring in an intern, their intern has done relatively well, and have got them in terms of competing. But at least for the Quakes itself, I kind of bumped them down because of that embarrassing loss that they suffer in the hands of the Sacramento Republic, and they also lost to LAFC over the before the June international break happened. But it's also the fact that this team is about to head to a really tough schedule, and that they're going to be on the road for a bit until they play that Cali Clasico at Stanford, and this will really test Alex Carvalho, and it also tests the problem that this team has in terms of why they haven't really got themselves into playoff contention and recover from a bad start, even though I mentioned they had been on a decent run ever since Almeida's been fired. But if there's one thing that this team have not solved ever since Almeida was fired, is the fact that they can't keep the ball out of the back of the net. Like, they have by far the worst defense in the league, and that if this team can simply defend, this team could actually be in the playoffs right now. But because they can't, and I don't know if this defensive issue is going to be solved either in the summer transfer window or over in the winter or in the off-season transfer window. That's kind of the reason why I don't think this is going to be a playoff team. But like I said, I don't mind the fact that this is not going to be a playoff team, because we knew this season was kind of a throwaway season. But it also kind of doesn't make me feel better, and certainly doesn't make Quakes fans feel better, the fact that with the recent good run that they had, it seems like it's going to be a mirage again, where they're destined to head to a relatively bad run. But now moving on to the Philadelphia Union. So for the Union, I would say it's an A- grade. I mean, I know they had that terrible stretch where they went winless for 5 games, and that they were drawing a lot, and even though they weren't losing game, I think it has to be very frustrated if you're a Union fans of how many draws that they suffer during that stretch, and they look like a team that even they were for most part at the top of the Eastern Conference, they don't look like a team that kind of belonged there. But still, I can't put them lower than an A minus. I mean, I could have maybe put them at a B plus at the harshest, because I feel like the way that the Union is playing is kind of a very Jim Curtin kind of way, where this is not a team that's going to blow you away, but this is a team that's going to grind out Resort. But one of the problem with grinding out Resort is that you can only grind out as much Resort until you have a situation where if the opposition get a goal, they will find ways to get a draw, because we know this Union attack is the biggest weakness of this team. Like they are a team that is heavily rely on their defense, and also heavily rely on probably the best goalkeeper right now in the league in Andre Blake. Well, actually not one of the best goalkeeper, because Sean Johnson is not going to be happy about if I left him out as well. I think he's right now the best goalkeeper in the league. But between him and Blake, and even in some extent Dane Sinclair, I think they're the best goalkeeper in the league. And again, the Union, so far if they can just figure out their attacking woes, then maybe they can of course get going. But I don't know if they can figure it out, because this was the problem heading into the season, where we know that this team has good defense, and this team likes to play this grind out kind of style. But will it be successful in a way where they can continue to go on an unbeaten run? And so far, at least in some extent, there's time that they could, and then there's time that they cannot. And then finally, we're going to go with, or actually not finally, I still have two more teams to talk about. We're going to go with RSL, and I'm going to say B+. And I feel like maybe this is a little harsh, because RSL has had an incredible season so far, and a lot of their players this season has been punching above their weight, and they have definitely outperforming in every statistic that have shown, and all the metrics that have been proving that this team should not be as good as they are right now. But I guess maybe the reason why I don't put them too high and don't give them like an A minus or an A grade is because they have had problem in terms of playing on the road, especially scoring on the road. And I think yes, they have won 2 games so far on the road, but one of them was a miraculous comeback against New England, and then the other the one they were able to win against Montreal, which I think that was probably the most impressive victory so far this season, to go on the road against a red hot Montreal team and still get all 3 points, and especially against a Canadian team, which Canadian team are teams that RSL do not like to face, because they always struggle against them. But yeah, this past weekend, it's unsurprising that they lost against a Canadian team, and it's just simply put, they just don't score enough goals on the road. And when you're on the road and you want to win games, you have to score goals, because that you're going to concede, and that so far I think RSL has done a good job on the road playing defense and not conceding a lot of goals. But when you don't score enough goals, it really doesn't matter the fact that your defense is above average on the road. You're still going to lose or drop points in those games. But now finally moving to the last team, and that of course is NYCFC. I mean, they're right next to LAFC again. Not a big surprise that the top team from each of the conference are in the A+ category. But if you want to talk about a team that is the most complete right now, it's got to be NYCFC. Like, they are right now probably the best team in the league right now. Sorry, LAFC fans. I know they're going to be very, very triggered by this, or even maybe the media will be triggered by this, because the media will always say that LAFC is the best team, and they have stats to prove it. With them being at the top of the Supporters Shield standing. But I really think in terms of balance itself, NYCFC is just simply better, and that if both of those teams face off against each other, I would actually say NYCFC would win it, because it's not just the fact that the attack is very good. They have a lot of difference maker, but their defense is just untouchable right now. Like, this team has gone 400 plus minutes without giving up a goal, and this team also had a stretch where they went 300 minutes without giving a shot on target against the opposition. Like, that is something that is just a remarkable stats that I didn't know before when I did watch one of the game, when they mentioned the fact that they hadn't given up a shots on goal for a very long time. And yeah, it just shows you that this team is probably the most complete team right now, and that this is a team that they look like a team that could be the first team in a while since we have seen a team repeat as MLS Cup champion. I mean, the last time that has happened is the Galaxy back in, I think, 2011 and 2012 when they repeat as champion. But you know, if there is one team that can come close to that, it's got to be NYCFC. And yeah, they definitely deserve the A+ mark so far this season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for my emotion / grading every team so far this season index. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as I mentioned before, if I grade your team a little bit too high or a little bit too low, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.